I'm Natasha Kirchak.
And I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you so much for joining us for this special occasion. This is Elections Part 2 here in Israel.
Live, we have just gotten the preliminary exit polls, and we have some very special guests with us here today. Joining us are 4 special guests to discuss some of the most pressing issues that Israeli voters are thinking about, and of course the aftermath of these exit polls. To our left is the founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman, and columnist for Newsweek and the editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman.
And to our right is Professor Chuck Freilich, former deputy national advisor in Israel, and Do Harlap, a
National Security Advisor.
I'm so sorry, National Security Advisor, I'm sorry. And Do Harlap, who is a consultant to the Likud, political consultant to the Likud. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in today. This is, we've got really big news today, and we're just going to jump into it.
So let's talk about the numbers, right? Okay, so we are seeing in these polls, according to Channel 12, we have blue and white with 32 seats, is it?
Blue and white with 34 seats.
34 seats, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And well, let's actually talk overall what we're looking at. Channel 12 says center left has about 55 seats.
Yes.
Channel 13 says 58 seats, with Khan saying 54. On the right, you have Channel 12 saying 57, Channel 13 saying 54, and Khan saying 56, and Lieberman with 8 and 8, and 12 and 13, and then 10 on Khan. How are we feeling about this? What is going to happen?
So I think we should wait until the morning. In the last 2 elections, in 2015 and 2019, many things have been changing until the morning. And I'm not that sure that Meretz, Democratic Union, and the Labour Party, Gesher, will be still with 5 or still be in the Knesset until tomorrow morning. But
okay, that's hard to say. I mean, if they were at 4, you could say that they might not make it in, but at 5 or 6, depending on which thing, there's not a chance they're not going to make it in the morning. Also, keep in mind the fact that the last time, at least, Kamel Fuchs on Channel 13 was exact. He came with exact numbers at night, and that's exactly how we ended up in the morning. Channel 12 and 11 were...
I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen. I'm just saying
we don't know for sure.
Absolutely, the results are still...
Absolutely, we don't know for sure. But based on these results, it's quite clear that I think the prime ministership of Prime Minister Netanyahu has come to an end. I do not see the way he ends up as prime minister when this is all done, because clearly, look, this was a vote about that. That's what this whole election was about. It wasn't about anything else. There was no issues in this election whatsoever. The only issue in this election was whether Prime Minister Netanyahu should continue under potential indictment and all the other issues, or whether it's time for somebody else. That's what the election was all about. He needed to get 61 votes in order to do that.
Unfortunately, the sad thing is that he's quite right. The sad thing is that he's quite right. The selection was basically a personal assault on Netanyahu, backed by a scandalous legal attempt at a coup. And, really...
Lieberman have lied to his voters last elections.
Not only that, under rational circumstances, you would have expected that all the public anger at having to go to a second election within 5 months would be directed at Lieberman.
Excuse me.
But for some reason, Lieberman, who reneged on all his promises, who reneged on all his commitments to his voters, pulled away and it forced an election on the public. And for some perverse reason, he's being rewarded. Go figure.
Okay, keep something in mind. The Israeli election law had called for Prime Minister Netanyahu to give back the mandate to the president. That's what has been done traditionally. That's what the law called for. He short-circuited that law by dispersing the Knesset. And so
Gantz had no chance of forming a government.
We have no idea.
What's your take on this? We haven't heard from you yet. You've been sitting there quietly, idly.
Stoic.
Right.
Stoic.
No, not stoic. I think, first of all, of course, caution is warranted. If we look at the experience of recent decades, what generally happens is that the left wins in the polls and the right wins in the elections. I think this time things are looking as if the outcome may be different. And I would agree with Mark that if that is the case, then it is going to be the end of the prime ministership of Mr. Netanyahu. I would disagree that the campaign was just about the personal issue. Of course, that was very much at the center, and the fact that the prime minister has been accused of a whole series of on charges of corruption
and too many cigars, really,
and other issues. What the election, though, is really about is whether the state of Israel can remain a vibrantly democratic and predominantly
Right.
Jewish state. And these results give us hope that that might be the case.
What hope are you talking about? A giant Gaza overlooking Tel Aviv? What could possibly go wrong?
Just,
No,
I don't
seriously.
know. I don't know. I don't know
So
if-
let's take a look at the security situation.
Basically,
how many of your viewers know
Sure.
what Professor
fundamental
Freilich
fact.
is talking about is
well,
that
let
we
him-
should all be happy
well, let
because
him
there's a prospect of setting up a giant
well, let's see-
Gaza
well, let's hear what Dr.
overlooking Tel
Freilich has to
Aviv.
say.
Yeah, please don't put words in my mouth, Mark.
You're not?
Martin, I don't know how many viewers know a fundamental fact. The combined population of the State of Israel and the West Bank today together is 40% Arab. That means in the Jewish state today, 2019, not in some horrible future, 2019, 40% of the population is not a partner to the Zionist dream of a Jewish state. I know of no definition under which 40% non-Jewish qualifies as a Jewish state. This election gives us a hope that we can begin the process of disengaging our populations.
Where would the border be? Where would the border be?
The border will be resolved in negotiations between
We've
the
been
sides.
negotiating
Martin.
the border for a quarter of a century.
You're right. It's
Quarter
very
of a
hard.
century.
It's very
Quarter of a
hard,
century.
and I don't
So-
think it's going to happen anytime.
So
in
what
the
are you going to do
future.
with this? What are you going to do with this
What we
recalcitrant
can-
40%
what we can
whilst we're
begin
negotiating
doing-
this difficult border?
What we can
Really?
begin doing is a process of unilateral civil disengagement,
Oh yeah.
so that we no longer
yeah,
set.
Well, what your voters have voted today.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's what
we
they
saw in
probably
Gaza. We saw how
have.
splendidly that worked.
And I think what we will see is a process where we can, first of all, stop settling outside the settlement blocks. And we can hopefully then also start encouraging settlers outside of those areas to begin returning home. We can try and
The
stabilize.
land of the dog.
We can
land
try
of
and
the
Dora,
dog.
stabilize.
I'd like you to-
The price of real
as
estate-
somebody
the
who
price-
is part of the
price of
Likud
real-
party,
Sorry,
why?
the price of
Hold on, Martin, one
the price of
second.
real estate within Israel is not high enough. He wants to bring it more.
Okay.
Let's see how the Likud
So you can
responds.
say many funny things about the situation of having this second elections in such a short time, with not really anything that the politicians have been doing between those two elections. But I'm pretty sure, as far as I can see it, that the question was not about going with the Palestinians for a peace process or not. I don't think that was the key question of those elections. Maybe it was about Netanyahu, maybe it was about a religious and state in Israel, maybe it was about that, but definitely not about Palestinians. And Benny Gantz have kept on saying, we're not left, we're not right, and he kept with this message for all the way.
I think that's absolutely true, but I think we have to keep in mind it was about something else also. It was a coalition without Smotrich, as an example. And in other words, most Israelis are very concerned about its security. Most Israelis certainly wouldn't believe in unilateral withdrawal from the West Bank at this point. Most Israelis do not believe that we're going to reach peace anytime soon.
I don't think so.
No, most Israelis do not believe. Do not believe
Oh,
we'll reach
do not
peace.
believe.
Do not
Yes.
believe, yes. The most Israelis, including most people on pretty far to the left, do not believe we can reach peace. Even the Meretz Party's platform talked for the first time about peace with security. I mean, so no one really believes we're about to reach peace.
What does that mean in operational terms?
Now, the reality is most Israelis don't want that, don't believe in peace now. However, and I'm not talking about the organization, however, most Israelis also want to keep the door open for peace, and most Israelis do not want to live in a binational state. So the reality is they want to find a solution that allows us to maintain our security, keep the IDF into the West Bank wherever it's necessary in any way that it has to be,
How are you
even
gonna
go back
justify-
into, excuse
how are
me,
you gonna
if you-
justify it?
excuse me, and go back into Gaza if necessary. However, we do not want them to become part of our civil society. We want to find a way that we do not annex them. And if we annex them, we become an apartheid state or we become a non-Jewish state.
So how do you think that a left wing? So let's
Complete distortion of reality. Complete distortion of reality. Because the left wing are now, after they've realized that basically you can't make peace with the Palestinians, but you can use it as an electoral platform. I've really seen no maps that can give Israel any security if you withdraw from Judea and Samaria. We're going to renounce sovereignty over areas, but keep our army in there. Really? Really, on what
No,
basis?
excuse me. You can
On what basis?
You can occupy an area, which is what we've been doing, without putting settlements there. That's legal, by the way.
It's a nice conversation about settlements and about the situation with the Palestinians. That doesn't have nothing to do with the
argument about
elections.
settlement. The argument about settlement should be closed by now.
I think it was an important part of the elections, and I think another important part, maybe actually of greater short-term impact to the electorate, was the whole issue of increasing religious coercion. And the fact that most of the public, which is secular to traditional, have found that in recent years, the ultra-Orthodox parties have been imposing a degree of coercion on the rest of the
Where have
public
you seen that?
people were unwilling to tolerate. And we have seen corruption, we have seen a denigration of Israel's democracy, not just on the part of the ultra-Orthodox parties, but them as well. The ultra-Orthodox population is absolutely exploding demographically. By 2060, 35% of Israel's Jewish population will be Haredi ultra-Orthodox.
What do you suggest you do about that? What do you suggest you do about
I suggest that we start cutting the social transfer payments that they receive, which greatly increase the birth rate. And we know when they've been cut in the past, the birth rates have lowered. I believe that we stop cutting supports for yeshivot. I believe that we start drafting everyone, because the assumption is that we're all equal before the law.
Absolutely. That was really important for the things that broke down the negotiations back in April.
I must say, I'm completely non-observant Jew. But when I hear this of coercion, I look at the traffic jams on Saturdays. I look at the non-kosher restaurants. I look at the beaches full with skimpy.
Okay.
No, it's not in Tel Aviv.
Okay.
It's up and down. It's not about
I'll say three.
Just
No, you've finished enough.
It's okay.
Excuse me,
Let him
you're
finish his thought. Let him
and
finish his
I would advise you to be more courteous and watch your manners.
Okay, Mark.
No, what?
All right,
interrupt
finish the
everybody.
thought, Martin.
But, I suggest we have a rule. Let's not say the Earth is flat. Okay. Let's say people can't claim that the Earth is flat and then demand the right to express that position. Okay, Israel is anything but a tyrannical theocracy. As I said, the traffic jams on Saturdays. There are more and more non-kosher restaurants. The beaches are full. There are leisure sports on Saturday. What people on the left are doing are bad-mouthing Israel. They're trying to denigrate
But
Israel.
we're also seeing polls that come out that say 70% of Israelis support a more secular government.
So then why don't the representatives do it?
Let me.
My question is, let's talk. I would like.
There's an important point to make here.
Hold on, but I do want to talk a little bit about what is going to happen. Okay, if we were to see the blue and white party come into power and Gantz come into power, how would that play out? What type of policy would we see being enacted?
Let's talk a little bit.
Because I still feel like there are so many differing voices within that party, and there's not a clear insight into what is going to take place.
How about if we start for respect for the rule of law and some fundamental values of democratic government? And that starts with the fact that a prime minister who is under indictment should resign.
That's not the law.
That's not the law.
I said should. I didn't say it's the law.
Oh, you said
excuse me, Martin. I haven't interrupted you, and I would appreciate it if you interrupt neither me or every other speaker here.
Okay.
First of all, I believe a prime minister who is about to be, the indictments are about to be handed down, should not be the prime minister, leading us at a time when we have extraordinary national security challenges. We have Iran, we have Hezbollah, we have Hamas. Just last week, the prime minister was about to launch a war or a virtual war in Gaza and was stopped from doing so by the attorney general and by the defense chiefs. When you're in that situation, when you are so desperate to stay in office, to stay out of jail, you can't lead a nation. When at least two of your ministers are about to be indicted, when one or two members of Knesset are about to be indicted, when the Attorney General has been hounded by the government, when all of the law enforcement agencies have been hounded, have been delegitimized by the Prime Minister and his other ministers, Israel's democracy has been under attack in recent years. And that is, let me finish my sentence, and that is one change that we can already see in the short term.
Okay.
I think that Israeli democracy is under attack by the judicial system, but that's something else. If we'll talk a little bit about the results that we see for now, so we can speak about who is winning and who is losing for tonight. So the big losers is the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, because 99% that they won't be a part of the next coalition. if this is going to be the results. Netanyahu is probably lost a lot this evening, and Lieberman and Benny Gantz probably are going to be the big winners. I'm not sure what's going to happen between Gantz and Yair Lapid. Okay, until now, their relations were not that smooth, and let's see what they're going to do now with the rotation, if they're going to speak about it. It's going to be interesting to see.
All right, so we're going to turn now to a man on the street. Basically, we decided to hit the streets and ask Israeli locals what they care about the most and what they voted for, basically. Let's take a look.
When you're going to vote, what is your main concerns?
Democracy, a future for my daughter, and human rights.
When you're voting, what are the top things that you care about the most?
Social welfare, education.
Security. Like to feel more comfortable and more safe in my country.
To change the government that's right now is doing nothing.
What's your top issue?
The economic issues, not the Israeli-Palestinian issues.
To get peace.
I think we need to change. After 13 years.
צריך שינוי.
אני הצבעתי לביבי, ואני תומך בכל מחנה הימין.
מה שצריך לטפל בו זה כלכלה, חברה, חינוך.
דבר ראשון חשוב לי טובת הכלל, חשיבה של מקרו ולא מיקרו.
When you work all your life and you pay for social security and all of a sudden in this age you just have 2,000 shekels and you have kids and grandkids and you want to help them a little bit. We need to change what happened in the hospitals.
ביבי בונה את המדינה, ביבי עזר פה לכלכלה, אף אחד לא יכול להגיע לתקשורת עם העולם כמו ביבי.
כי הגיע הזמן לתת הזדמנות למישהו אחר, שאולי כן יכול על שינוי, גם אם אין לו ניסיון, הוא ייצור ניסיון. הגיע הזמן לתרום עוד קצת, הגיע הזמן לפתור בעיות שביבי לא מצליח לפתור.
מה הדברים הכי חשובים לך שאתה הולך לבחור?
זה ביטחון, מה זה? הוא שומר על הביטחון, אין פיגועים, אין כלום, שנים.
למה כחול לבן?
שינוי.
כן?
שינוי.
חיילים שלנו נמצאים בשבי ואף אחד לא מטפל בזה.
הוא עושה עבודה נאמנה עם הכור של האיראנים ורץ בכל העולם. גנץ לא, אף אחד לא מתאים.
What are the most important things for you guys when you guys are going to vote? Is it education, security? What would you say?
Change.
That's it?
That's it.
Just the difference in Prime Minister?
No, just the difference in state of mind. I think Israel needs to experience some kind of transformation or change.
כאילו הגיע הזמן לחולל פה איזשהו שינוי שביבי לא מצליח לעשות.
We need people who are not corrupt, people who are honest.
למה ביבי?
כי רק ביבי, אני לא יכול לראות אותם. לא, העיקר לא לראות אותם בשלטון.
Why Gantz?
It's the less harmful that I think, because I am tired of ביבי.
הוא שומר על מדינת ישראל. יבוא מישהו אחר, הכל יתפרק במדינה.
לגליזציה של קנאביס ושלום לכולם במדינת ישראל שלנו.
It's time for change, guys.
למה ביבי?
רק ביבי. רק ביבי.
צריך להחליף את מה שיש כרגע.
מבחינת ביטחון, אני חושב שביבי האיש הנכון לשים בראש.
למה ביבי?
כי ביבי גאון.
We need a strong left.
Hi, everybody. I'm Natasha Kirchak.
And I'm Aaron Porras, and thank you so much for joining us again. If you're just joining us now, we are here in the studio with Professor Chuck Freilich, who is from the Deputy National Security Advisor.
Was
the former
Deputy National Security Advisor, and Do Harlap, who's
a political
representative
consultant
from
to the Likud party.
Likud.
We also have to our left, founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman, and columnist for Newsweek and editor of HistoryCentral.com, Mark Schulman. So let's talk a little bit about the polls. Again, we're going to give an update to the audience that is watching us. Okay, so Channel 12 is essentially reporting that Kahol and Lavan have 34 seats. Channel 13 says they have 33. Kan 11 says they have 32. And Likud, according to Channel 12, has 33. 13 says they have 31 seats, and Kan says they have 32. Now, when you add all of the parties up together, here you can see the graphic. Okay. When you add all these parties up together, on the center left, According to Channel 12, there are 55 seats. Channel 13 says 58. Kan says 54. And on the right, Channel 12 says you have 57 seats. Channel 13 says you have 54 seats for the right. And Kan says you have 56 seats for the right.
And of course, you have Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu party, which according to both Channel 12 and 13 is getting 8 seats, now 9. And then, of course, you have 10 seats according to Kan, which makes him the deciding vote in the next coalition negotiations.
All right, so coming back to our crowd here, I know everybody is anxious to continue speaking about this. We spoke earlier a little bit about what we think is going to play out now. The question is, what do you think was the ultimate deciding factor in how Israelis voted? What did they care about the most when they went to the polls, and how is that going to play out with the new coalition that comes into power?
Two things. Obviously, the question of whether Netanyahu should continue because of all the indictments and everything else, but that was prior also. But it was a little bit stronger this time because the process went along. What happened this time, of course, is a lot of leaks came out of all the testimony that took place in all of the investigations. In other words, because there was a shimur, when the attorneys all got transcripts of all the discussions. The transcripts were all out there. Once the transcripts were out there, they were clearly going to leak. And so you had all of these leaks of all the transcripts of Alovich saying this and Miriam Edelson saying this, and none of them were particularly positive for Netanyahu. So that's one thing that had some sort of impact, I think. The second thing, of course, was Lieberman and Lieberman's decision to go on religion. And that was an important thing. It got many people thinking. It got people involved. And of course, I think that one of the big mistakes that Netanyahu made was he made Rafi Peretz the Minister of Education. Rafi Peretz became the Minister of Education. The first thing he talked about was making sure that every 8th and 9th grader gets a Tanakh, that they go to the Kotel for a Bar Mitzvah, and that values were the most important thing and not being ability for the workforce. The average Israeli family said to themselves, wait a second, Bennett may have been from a religious party, but he was talking about math and computer science. That's okay with me. You can bring a little religion as long as you put math and computer science there first. Rafi Peretz, on the other hand, was like, wait a second, we're not, this is not what we want.
Well, he also said gay conversion therapy was a good thing, and a number of other controversial statements.
Okay, first of all, I would just like to take a look at the Likud, the Likud headquarters right now. Let's see, guys, can you pull up an image of that? Okay, so very few people are there right now. Obviously, this is
it's a pretty somber moment, I think.
Somber, tough moment.
Well, they're just reeling probably from these results.
I mean, there are worries to celebrate about anything. Of course, these are preliminary exit polls, so we still don't know the final results here.
Sure.
But Dor, would you
like
to speak to how your party is feeling right now?
I'm part of the organization of this event, and every time it's too early, until 12, around 12, no one is coming. Right. Even if it's a sure win. And the second thing is that until now, Yahadut HaTorah and Shas and Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked already have said that they will recommend Netanyahu to the president to be prime minister, to build up the government.
Wait, that's Yamina UTG?
Yamina is Ayelet Shaked and the Haredim parties, which is pretty impressive for now. And also, few ministers from the Likud already have came up in front of the camera and said that they will support Netanyahu and they will not give anyone else in the Likud try to take his seat. And on the other side, Benny Gantz, I'm not sure that the Arabs are going to recommend on him. I'm pretty sure they're not. I don't know what Lieberman is going to do because he has had many declarations about that.
So that's actually a big question that I have, which is about the Arab parties. The Joint Arab List has never been part of the ruling coalition. They've always been in the opposition, but now they're once again the third largest party coming out of the polls.
Yeah, they're estimated to have 13 seats according to Channel 13, which made basically...
It's a massive difference, and so if they're not included in the coalition, then those seats are going to have to come from somewhere else.
You have a very perverse situation here, because the only way Gantz can set up a government is to have the support of the Arab parties. That means people like Lieberman, who's been very, very abrasive towards the Israeli Arabs, Bogi Alon, who's supposed to be right-wing, Yoaz Hendel, and Zvi Hauser. All these people are going to be in a coalition which rests for its completely on the Arab vote. This is a really, if you're worried about Israeli democracy, there's something to worry about.
No, I think you're making a big mistake here, because the reality is they won't rest on the Arab vote because, in my opinion, I could be wrong, that once he can have a coalition because he has this, he gets the mandate from the president, because the Arab parties say, we support him as the most viable candidate, then at that point, then the chance of the Likud falling apart becomes very great. It may take a week, it may take 2 weeks, it may take 2 months. But the reality is that he needs the Arab parties to recommend him to become prime minister. Once that happens, the dynamics change rapidly.
But what about, okay, so again, what about a unity government? Because again, if we're talking about coalition agreements and negotiations, one of the bigger pushes that Avigdor Lieberman, who at this point is considered a kingmaker of sorts, has been campaigning on is forming a unity coalition between Likud.
There would be a unity government in 2 moments, the moment Prime Minister Netanyahu resigns. That's what it all comes down to. The reality is, because of the indictments and everything else, no one else can sit together with him. They've all said they're not going to sit with him. And he won't go into any government that won't give him chasina, won't give him immunity. So the reality is, at that moment, there'll be a unity government.
Professor Friedrich?
I think we're going to see what is going to be a very, very painful process for Likud to evict someone who has been prime minister for 13 years. But in the end, I think the most Likud members will prefer to do that rather than to go and risk a third round of elections. So I think the idea of the national unity, of a secular national unity government, is probably the likely outcome.
It's certainly appealing to the public.
And it's very appealing to most of the public. But I want to say something about the Arab Party, the joint list, as it's called.
We have a graphic here as well.
That we have, okay. Right block 56.
So out of the 120.
I think they are going.
61.
They are going to.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean
but left center is left center and Arabs.
Right.
You have to say that.
Right.
That's an important
Look,
thing.
they are going to face the Arab
well,
Party. The joint list is going to face a historic decision. Until now, they have played partly of their own doing, partly because they were forced into this position. But they were forced into a position where they were on the outside. They were kibitzers. They were severe critics of the government. And the policy was a negative policy. I think actually Israeli-Arab politics have been very extreme, very ugly in recent years. Here is an opportunity for them to play a positive role, to say, we really want to be in, we want to be part of the system, we want to be Israeli citizens. And I think that's what most of the Arab public really wants. That's what all the polls show. And now what we have to see happen is a change in terms of the Arab politicians who've talked a different game in recent years. Now they have an opportunity, and we saw Ayman Uda make a statement a couple of weeks ago indicating that maybe that historic change is finally happening. And I think that will be very positive for Israeli democracy.
All right,
because let me say to you, first of all, when you look at Netanyahu's achievement, even tonight, he had 3 parties and 3 chiefs of staff trying to bring him down, together with massive support from the mainstream media. So that's first of all. When you look at the results, you must remember that this was a very great achievement by Netanyahu, given the opposition he had. But the joint list, the whole rationale of the joint list is that it's against Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. And what Professor Faik doesn't tell you is that the only thing that puts them together, the only thing that puts the 3 parties together, is the fact that they oppose Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. How are they going to get their act together? You have on one side communists, and you have the other side Islamic fundamentalists. How are they going to get? How are they going to dovetail into the Zionist enterprise?
Because the reality is that the Arab populations themselves are integrating.
Yes,
Go into any, because there was no alternative. Go into any hospital, go into any pharmacy, go into any place, go into the high tech at this point. In high tech, there are high tech funds just from the Arab sector. The Arab sector is changing dramatically.
And that means that Israel is a Jewish state?
Many of them do.
Some of them are willing to accept that.
You're right that there's a real problem there.
And Benny Gantz's government is going to depend on their recommendation.
And here is an opportunity for the Arab population to make a really positive statement and to change that position.
They voted for Muslim extremists, really.
No, they're not all like that. They're not all like that, Martin.
But at least
and the public is different, and the Arab voting public electorate is different from with the party, and maybe this will be an opportunity for the party to change their position.
The Arab public in the hospitals and the chemist shop are not the people who are going to be in government or supporting the government. The Arabs voted almost en bloc for anti-Zionist parties time and time again. And by the way, if there was a rule of law, they wouldn't be able to run for parliament.
I'd like to talk about Lieberman specifically and just kind of...
Just like a significant portion of the Arab population votes for Zionist parties.
No, that's misrepresenting the fact. Over 80%, what do you call a significant portion? A significant 80% at least.
20%.
At least 80% voted for anti-Zionist parties, at least.
And what percentage of the Haredi population votes for anti-Zionist parties?
The Haredim are not trying to bring down the Jewish state.
They're anti-Zionist, though.
They're anti-Zionist.
So there are reports saying that Netanyahu actually called Ayelet Shaked and Bennett up to discuss coming together and joining in some type of merger. Any response to that?
Again, sorry?
No, that there might be a merger now between the Likud and Yamina.
Makes no difference.
It doesn't make any change in the numbers. I think that Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, when they left the Likud 7 years ago, I think, something like that, it was a big mistake in 2012, I think. I saw Ayelet Shaked. She was elected to be a Chavrat Merkaz Likud, a member of the committee, the main national committee of the Likud. She was elected, and on the same day, she used the media that came to show the committee first meeting. She came to and opened up a new party, which was called HaYisraelim. I think she's now in the fourth party that she is part of, and I'm not sure that joining the Likud is going to be happening soon, because I don't think they have what it takes to do the long democratic process of a democratic party, which is the Likud is the only democratic party today.
And from the other side, we're hearing blue and white in the Joint Arab List basically saying that the Netanyahu era is over. So they're already announcing that.
I think one thing we have to talk about that is different than last time is that last time was a question of who was going to be first, blue and white or Likud. And that was the question we went to sleep with, and that was the answer we got, and Likud inched out. But we weren't in a situation where we knew that Lieberman was not on the side of Likud, that we knew that Lieberman was on the side of blue and white in the general sense of thing, was not going to vote for a Likud government to start with, and also where the bloc is now such that the right-wing bloc does not have 61 votes. That we're going to go to sleep with that number.
Neither bloc has 61
No, we understand, but there's Lieberman, and Lieberman is clearly leaning the other way, has been voting the other way. But what I'm saying is the reality is very different. In other words, if last time we could say we went to sleep and in the morning the results changed dramatically, what changed dramatically is Likud went up a little bit and blue and white went down, but the blocs didn't change very much during that.
It's not that dramatic.
Right. It's a pretty big difference now between the blocs, according to all of these polls. One vote is not going to make a difference.
So something that I'd also like to discuss is kind of the alliance between the United States and Israel. If Netanyahu, were not to lead the next government coalition, what change would take place in terms of American relations with Israel?
You asked the question in a way that's saying that tomorrow we're going to wake up to a morning that Netanyahu is not going to lead Israel. I think, according to the results, that Netanyahu will still be the prime minister at least in the next 2 years.
I'm just saying that, but if let's say he were not to be.
2 years? No.
Maybe rotation.
Not 2 years.
That's what I think.
Look, the question.
But still, I do think it's important to ask that question.
I believe that Netanyahu is the best candidate to speak up with Trump about the deal of the century. I don't know who else can do that, because Benny Gantz is pretty scaring when you see him, when every sentence that he says, something is switching and he's confusing a lot about what he says. And I'm also not sure that he knows exactly what does he want. I don't know what his policy about Israel and the Palestinians. I know what Netanyahu have to say about that.
He's not the only person in the blue and white party. You also have.
We have to keep in mind something very simple. The relationship between the United States and Israel has nothing to do with Prime Minister Netanyahu or any individual prime minister. It's a relationship built on interests, on connections, on 50 years, 70 years, even more before the state of connectivity between the two countries. I don't think it'll make any difference in the immediate sense, the relationship. I see no reason why any of these other, whoever is going to be the prime minister, if it's not Netanyahu, can't create a relationship with Trump. As we know, Trump goes hot and cold on everybody, so there's no way of knowing who he's going to be hot with and who he's going to be cold with.
He's been pretty warm to Israel for the last 3 years.
But in this election, though, he stepped back. He would not give Netanyahu the gift that Netanyahu wanted.
All right, Professor, give us one last remark, because then we're going to hear from some Israelis. One second.
I think actually, if the results are indeed indicative of what's going to happen in the end, I think this can have a critical impact on the U.S.-Israeli relationship. First of all, let's take the base of support for Israel in the United States, the Jewish community, which votes overwhelmingly, it's about 80% Democratic, which is increasingly alienated from Israel in recent years. And here the role that the Prime Minister has played has been absolutely central to that. Second of all, the Democratic Party itself, the fact that the Prime Minister went up against President Obama in Congress, an unprecedented event, I think.
And just as well.
In all of an unprecedented event in American history.
Israel.
And now we see Prime Minister Netanyahu announcing last week that he wants to annex a significant part of the West Bank, something which will cause an absolute rupture with some of the most important bases of American support for Israel. So I think the fact that we can have a different outcome here can have an absolutly critical impact and even save the future of the
We're going to take a moment. We're going to go back to the streets of Israel and see what some more voters have to say.
But you...
Did you vote yet?
No, I'm going now to vote.
Have you voted yet today?
No, on the way.
כבר הצבעת?
לא, עכשיו אני הולכת.
ולמי את הולכת להצביע?
לכחול לבן.
אתה הצבעת כבר היום?
כן.
ולמי הצבעת?
לביבי.
Have you voted yet today?
Yes.
And who did you vote for?
מרץ, ברק.
אז את כבר הצבעת היום?
כן, הצבעתי.
למי הצבעת?
לזהות.
אתה הצבעת היום?
לא.
ולמה לא?
אני לא מאמין בלהצביע.
באמת?
כן.
Did you vote today?
Yeah, yes I did.
Who'd you vote for?
I voted for Benny Gantz.
כן, הספקתי להצביע.
ולמי הצבעת?
לביבי.
לא, לא הצבעתי היום.
ולמה לא?
כי זה פחות מעניין אותי.
נצביע בערב.
ולמי תצביעו?
בעזרת השם לביבי.
Who are you going to vote for today?
anyone except ביבי.
חד משמעית ביבי.
רק כחול לבן. למי אתה הצבעת? אני לא...
ביבי, בנימין נתניהו.
I think that I go for Gantz.
Who are you planning on voting for?
כחול לבן, of course.
The Democratic camp.
חייבים ללכת להצביע.
נכון?
All right, now let's talk a little bit more about those coalition agreements, because we're hearing a lot about how potentially the big losers here are not necessarily Netanyahu or the Arab parties, but actually the Haredi parties, the religious parties, because Netanyahu still has a chance to form a coalition if he leaves them out and goes towards, towards the other
what's
parties.
being said is that Netanyahu won't be able to make a coalition now with the Haredim. It's not going to make up enough seats, so he will either have to go to blue and white or to Lieberman. What is...
Anyway, I would just like to say one thing about the previous discussion.
Okay, wait, but we're moving on. We want to
because
focus
there's no one in blue and white who has any experience in international relations, any experience in international diplomacy. But
let's move on to the coalition.
Let's talk about the coalition issue and
yes.
Yeah.
What's the question?
So unity government. So we're talking
How
about. I mean, now it looks like Netanyahu will have to have some type of unity government according to these preliminary polls. Okay?
But I think we're a little bit living in the past here. We're talking about Netanyahu. The person who's probably going to be designated by the president to form coalition talks is going to be Gantz. And he can then offer, he can recommend to Netanyahu that he join in a national unity government. The fact is that neither side has the 61 they need, but Gantz can put together more than 61. Netanyahu, based on these results, cannot. So he will probably get the nod first from the president.
So?
Excuse me. I don't think that the way that we look at the things are correct. read my lips, tomorrow the Arabs are not going to recommend Gantz to be the prime minister. It's not going to happen.
I think you're wrong. I think I've spoken to them. I think you're definitely wrong.
I would be happy to bet you a beer.
Who do you think that they would recommend?
They won't recommend anyone. They recommend themselves.
No,
That's what they do always.
They won't go into the government, but they'll recommend Gantz because getting rid of Netanyahu is such a high priority to them. Netanyahu made a huge mistake in these last 2 weeks, in my opinion. He made a double mistake. Number one, he started his campaign against the Arabs early, so early enough that they got really upset. And B, because they got so upset at this point, they will do anything to get him out of power, including recommending somebody who they may not want to be prime minister.
Speculating.
The Arabs might get rid of Bibi, but then they'll get Lieberman. So be careful what you wish for, because Lieberman is probably far more hostile towards the Arab population than Bibi is. You might be blinded by his current deceptive tactics of being anti-Haredi, but Lieberman's past is full of wheeling and dealing with Haredim, and he's just riding this card at the moment. So when the Arabs, I'm very doubtful that Netanyahu will be able to form a coalition.
Now we're hearing.
But getting rid of Netanyahu will bring Lieberman to the Arabs, and we'll see how well that works out.
Okay, we're now hearing Miri Regev saying that Likud says they won't dethrone Netanyahu and are floating the possibility of a third election.
As I said before, and also Israel Katz have said it.
Now keep on saying it until the moment they
let's talk about Rivlin then.
When you kill a king, you have to kill a king at the totally.
Well, let's bring in the president and kind of his position here with preventing a third election. Then, is there anything that Rivlin can do to make sure that we don't go to elections again?
I think it's not on his place to do. Okay, the law about constructing government is pretty specific. Okay, it doesn't give the president any specific way to affect the situation. He has to call every leader of any party that got elected to the parliament and ask him what does he recommend, and doesn't really have any.
Well, except for the fact that there are two possibilities. Number one is if no party gets the 61 votes recommended.
No, that's not the law.
Yes, then the president can decide who he wants. In other words, if there's no majority for anybody, it's not clear who could form the government, then at that point the president can do whatever he wishes to do at that point.
He can choose whomever from any of the parties.
Dor is correct that the law does not stipulate what the president must do other than consulting with the different parties. But Israeli practice for the 70 years of statehood has been that he appoints the head of the largest party. So if blue and white, that has been the practice.
With Kadima and Bibi,
exactly.
Kadima got it
first and they failed.
I don't think there's been a single case.
In the middle of a term. It was not right after elections. There's
never been an election in which the head of the largest party was not appointed as the first person to try and form a coalition. So the president will be absolutely within tradition and precedent if he asks Mr. Gantz to form the government. And since there is I tend to agree with, I think Martin said this before, that the Arab Party won't support Gantz. There's a good likelihood, but that doesn't mean that they'll support Netanyahu. That of course they won't do. So they will join at least in a blocking coalition. They may not join the coalition, but in a blocking coalition. And again, that puts Mr. Gantz in the position where he's the leader of the coalition formation process, and he can then ask the Likud to join. But he has said that he will not ask Mr. Netanyahu to be a part of that coalition. And if that happens, then we can maybe see the jockeying for power within the Likud, and this will require what will be a very ugly process of an internal rebellion.
As far as I see it, we will go to a third election. Soon enough, in half a year.
That could be on the cards, but the problem with democracy is that you can never blame the dictatorship for the results. You can never blame the dictator for the results, and unfortunately, I think we've seen an election here that is going to make the country increasingly difficult to govern, because I don't even know if a third election will produce a stable government. The country is apparently almost deadlocked. I don't think it should be deadlocked. I think that the certain issues should be clearly resolved one way or the other. But we seem to be in a situation where the electorate cannot choose a viable government. Because even if Gantz puts together a government.
By the way, we're hearing right now that Otzma Yehudit has not passed the threshold. So that,
If the results are correct, and we're
these results
talking
are-
66 seats against Netanyahu, that is a pretty clear decision. It's not a landslide, but it's not a case where it's 61-59, where you could say a few votes either way. I mean, that's not really a mandate. 66 is a mandate. It's a working one. The people have spoken.
Well, I don't know if the people have really spoken where they want a government which is totally dependent for its existence on the support of the Muslim extremists, the communists, and
Well, it's not necessarily.
anti-Zionists.
The negotiations have yet to occur, and there could be a centrist government. There could be some sort of negotiation with Likud or other parties on the right that are maybe a little bit more
Look at blue and white. What's the blue and white security policy going to be when you have people who came from Meretz and you have people who came from the far? What's their policy going to be?
3 out of the 4 leaders of the party are also former defense chiefs of staff.
Yeah,
It will reflect the general views of the army, which have been pretty consistent over the last 40 years.
I don't remember anyone in the army opposing unilateral withdrawal. Not even Bogi Ya'alon, and after
Your point being what? They have no idea what they're doing in security? In terms of security, I don't think we have a problem. We can talk about diplomacy, maybe.
Really?
But
You don't have a problem?
There
in terms of experience, I'm talking about.
too many positions that better prepare someone for dealing with Israel's national security issues than being former chief of staff.
Ehud Barak, for instance.
Here we had 3 chiefs of staff. Here we had
Really?
3 chiefs of staff and a former defense minister. The current prime minister, who, by the way, is quite good at diplomacy and national security affairs, when he first ran for office, his background was as a furniture salesman. So in terms of qualifications for
Israel
office,
ambassador in the United Nations.
You're right. He started as a former furniture salesman. Here we have 3
was not a
leaders.
salesman, he was
We
the
have 3
CEO.
leaders
Kindergarten
who
as well. Why
were
don't you
chiefs
bring
of
that up?
staff, and one was a defense minister. If you can disagree with their policies,
I don't
Martin,
trust them.
but to belittle their experience and to write them off is rather inappropriate.
Let's just give you a quick rundown. Gabi Ashkenazi, who was a commander of the Northern Front, whose only policy was to know about Syria, said after just before he left the army that Assad was a moderate when he had fresh intelligence in his head. Gabi Ashkenazi, Assad is a moderate and we can deal with him. Really? I mean, that's the guy you want to give the security to?
I think one of the main issues that we're finding here is just trying to understand, what policies will essentially be implemented if there is a new coalition that takes place, which is why we want to actually take a look at the Israeli political parties right now and see how they've changed significantly since the April election. So let's take a look at that.
Israelis vote for parties, not people. And there's around 30 on the list, with 120 spots to fill in the Knesset, or Israel's parliament. Here are the 10 parties at the forefront of tomorrow's election. First off, we have the Likud, headed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the flagship secular party on the right of the political spectrum. This right-wing party advocates for a free capital market and tough security. Though it's technically secular, the religious groups in Israel find themselves most comfortable with Likud. Netanyahu says he supports a 2-state solution in the future, but takes a hard line with regards to any territorial concessions, and has recently been giving the green light for new settlements in the West Bank. The Israeli leader is currently under indictment pending a hearing for corruption charges. Next, we have the Likud's main political rival, the center-left Blue and White Party, headed by former IDF Chief of Staff Benny Gantz, who would rotate leadership with Yesh Atid's Yair Lapid. The party advocates for introducing prime ministerial term limits, barring indicted politicians from serving in the Knesset, and amending the nation-state law to include minorities. Blue and White also vows to invest in early childhood education, expand healthcare, and re-enter negotiations with the Palestinian Authority for a peace agreement. On the right, we have Israel Beitenu, headed by former Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman. Lieberman has taken a hard stance on pushing religious parties out of the government, is a strong advocate for drafting ultra-Orthodox Jews into the military, supports opening businesses on the Sabbath, and is critical of religious authority over marriage in Israel. Israel Beitenu advocates for a creation of a Palestinian state that would include the exchange of some Arab towns in Israel for Jewish towns in the West Bank. Heading back to the left, we have the Labor Gesher Party, which is considered the flagship of the left. This party is led by Amir Peretz and hopes to increase the minimum wage to 40 shekels an hour, construct 200,000 public housing units, and increase funding for public health care. The Labor Party has mostly collapsed, earning just 4.43% of the votes. So, in a bid to return to its former strength, Labor and Gesher have merged. Moving back to the right, the Yamina Party is a political coalition of national religious groups headed by former Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked. Yamina advocates for a settlement annexation, opposes the Trump peace plan outright, and wants more aggressive military action against Hamas and Hezbollah. Shaked is just one of two secular right-wingers on this party's list, with many members of the party in favor of a state run by Orthodox Jewish law. Also on the right is the ultra-Orthodox Shas Party, headed by the Minister of Interior, Aryeh Deri, who was formerly convicted of corruption when in the same position back in 1999. Shas represents Sephardic Orthodox Jews and tries to end prejudice against their communities. The UTJ, or United Torah Judaism Party, represents Ashkenazi Orthodox communities. It's headed by Yaakov Litzman. His party wants to maintain the status quo in regard to religion versus state issues, like keeping young Orthodox people out of the army. To the left is a new party called the Democratic Union, a merger between Meretz and a few other left-wing parties. It's headed by Nitzan Horowitz. Former Prime Minister Ehud Barak helped create this party, which says they will not join forces with the right. The party supports a Palestinian state, more minority rights, and calls for taxing the rich. Next up is the Joint Arab List Party, headed by Ayman Odeh. This party is the only to represent the Arab community. It unites the Hadash, Ra'am, Balad, and Ta'al parties. The Joint List supports a two-state solution and campaigns for Arab and minority rights. On the opposite side of the spectrum is the Otzma Yehudit Party, or Jewish Power. In English, a far-right party that follows the word of Rabbi Kahana, who is heavily criticized for spreading anti-Arab sentiment. With Itamar Ben-Gvir at its head, the group is considered the most extreme right on the list and calls for the destruction of the Oslo Accords and taking over the Temple Mount back from Jordanian authorities. Well, I could go on for days, but I'll wrap it up here. Make sure to vote.
All right, well, people have cast their vote.
People have cast their vote.
So coming out of this, let's take a look at the Yamina headquarters. Let's see, can we get that up on the screen? Come on, guys, you can do it.
Yamina.
All right, where we've actually just gotten some news that Bennett and Shaked are apparently splitting. They've officially announced that they're breaking up.
Ayelet Shaked is splitting off
with Bezalel Smotrich and Rafi Peretz. Okay, so that's just a little update for our viewers. But let's go back and talk about what these preliminary exit polls are telling us. Again, just a recap.
To recap, we're looking at 58 to 54 seats from the left versus the right on Channel 13. 8 seats for Lieberman, 9 seats for Lieberman. We are looking on Channel 12, 55 seats on the left block, including the Arabs, and 57 on the right, with now it's a little bit shaken up by this new news, so we're not 100% sure how that's going to play out in the negotiations during the coalition agreements.
As of now, they're saying Yamina has about 7.
Remember one thing, that last time without Lieberman he had 60. So every way you look at it, he has now dropped from, if these reports are correct, he's dropped from 60 to 57, 55, 54, depending on which poll. But he's dropped significantly from the numbers he had in the last election without Lieberman.
Which leads us to, our last comments here. Tomorrow we're going to wake up, we're going to have a much clearer sense of where this country is headed. But what would you guys like to tell our audience?
Some final predictions.
And your final predictions, your final insight. Why don't you start over there, Professor?
Well, if the different polls are reasonably accurate, then we're looking at the end of the premiership of Mr. Netanyahu. And I would say that this is an opportunity for national revival, for almost a rebirth, to start becoming what Israel is supposed to be, a democracy, which is run by the rule of law, not by corruption, and for Israel to remain a predominantly Jewish state and a democratic state.
I don't think we're going to know tomorrow morning what's going to happen. I think we have a few long weeks, maybe months, until we understand how it's going to play out. Because we have to see how the players, Lieberman, Netanyahu, Gantz, Lapid, and the president and the Arabs, how they will play in this game. And because the game just starting now, and we will only know a little what's going to happen after the holidays, as far as I understand.
To some extent, I think that's correct. I think the one difference is I've been saying all day that we're not going to know tomorrow morning. I was asked to do an interview on a Los Angeles television show tomorrow morning at their time, and I said, well, we're not really going to know anything. We know more than we thought we'd know. Let's put it that way. What we expected to be this evening was that either Gesher or Meretz were going to be, Gesher being Labor, were going to be right on the numbers they needed to get in at the, and they wouldn't have enough to get in. We'd be questioning whether they'd be getting in or not. Neither party is close to that. And we also were questioning whether Otzma was going to get in, and they're way below that from what we understand. So those were the major factors that I thought were going to determine this election, and we're going to have to wait to find the last vote counted to see whether they were going to get in. The reality is we now know those answers pretty definitely. It's going to be hard to see they're going to drop from 6 or 5 to below 4. So those things are not going to change. I think there can be mistakes in the polling. We know that Israel's exit polls are never the most accurate thing on earth. But like we said earlier, Camille Fox was 100% accurate last time.
On Channel 13.
And so on Channel 13. So we'll have to see whether he's accurate again. The reality is I think that the era of Netanyahu is most likely over. It's going to be hard for him to find a way of creating a coalition. Again, keeping in mind the fact that the last day for President Rivlin to decide who he's going to give the mandate to is the day that Netanyahu has his review of his indictments. That's what's called Shimur, and that's the same day. And I just don't see President Rivlin, if he has to decide, if it's an even decision here and there, if he's going to give it to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's about to be indicted. It just makes no sense to me that he'll do that, and especially after having a rather bitter experience with Prime Minister Netanyahu when it came to the last election, where he did not give back the mandate like Rivlin was expecting. So if I'm Rivlin, fool me once, but don't fool me twice.
All right,
well, I think it's a very somber day for Israeli democracy. I find it rather difficult to share Professor Freilich's optimism. I think Israeli democracy has been strong and kicking. It's certainly, and there have been attempts to delegitimize certain institutions in the Israeli administration system, particularly the Prime Minister, who's being continually delegitimized by the press and his political opponents. And I think. One of the things I think is that you're seeing a growing skepticism in the Israeli public regarding the law enforcement in this country. But I think that we're in a very difficult situation. I think the Israeli electorate is proved itself to be almost dysfunctional, and it cannot elect a government that can rule. And the most likely result may be a third election, which I doubt will produce any more functional outcome.
Well, for our sanity, I think we're all hoping there won't be a third
elections.
All right. Sometimes I were primaries, right?
Yeah. All right, my friends, that is it for tonight's live election broadcast. We'd like to thank our guests. Thank you so much for sitting with us here today. And tomorrow, we're all going to wake up together and see what happens. So please tune in to ILTV tomorrow.
Now, by the way.
Thanks for watching now. Yeah. And you ready to go to bed?
I'm more than ready.
I think we're ready to call it a day. Thanks, everybody.